January 25th, Feast of the Conversion of St. Paul the Apostle.
A reading from the Acts of the Apostles. Paul addressed the people in these words: I am a Jew, born in Tarsus in Cilicia, but brought up in this city. At the feet of Gamaliel I was educated strictly in our ancestral law and was zealous for God, just as all of you are today. I persecuted this way to death, binding both men and women and delivering them to prison. Even the high priest and the whole council of elders can testify on my behalf. For from them I even received letters to the brothers and set out for Damascus to bring back to Jerusalem in chains for punishment those there as well. On that journey, as I drew near to Damascus, about noon a great light from the sky suddenly shone around me. I fell to the ground and heard a voice saying to me, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? I replied, Who are you, sir? And he said to me, I am Jesus the Nazarene, whom you are persecuting. My companions saw the light, but did not hear the voice of the one who spoke to me. I asked, What shall I do, sir? The Lord answered me, Get up and go into Damascus, and there you will be told about everything appointed for you to do. Since I could see nothing because of the brightness of that light, I was led by hand by my companions and entered Damascus. A certain Ananias, a devout observer of the law, and highly spoken of by all the Jews who lived there, came to me and stood there and said, Saul, my brother, regain your sight. And at that very moment I regained my sight and saw him. Then he said, The God of our ancestors designated you to know his will, to see the righteous one, and to hear the sound of his voice. For you will be his witness before all to what you have seen and heard. Now why delay? Get up and have yourself baptized and your sins washed away, calling upon his name. The word of the Lord.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. Jesus appeared to the 11 and said to them, Go into the whole world and proclaim the gospel to every creature. Whoever believes and is baptized will be saved. Whoever does not believe will be condemned. These signs will accompany those who believe. In my name they will drive out demons. They will speak new languages. They will pick up serpents with their hands. And if they drink any deadly thing, it will not harm them. They will lay hands on the sick, and they will recover. The Gospel of the Lord.
January 25th, the Feast of the Conversion of St. Paul the Apostle. There are two choices for the first reading. The first one is Acts of the Apostles 22, verses 3 to 16, and the second one is Acts of the Apostles chapter 9, verses 1 to 22. These are two of the three accounts of Paul's conversion on the road to Damascus. They're very similar, and the differences between them, such as in the first one it says that companions of St. Paul didn't hear the voice, whereas the second one they did hear the voice of Jesus speaking from the clouds. These are minor differences and explainable in the fact that they're told in a different way. Acts 9 is more a narrative of what happened. Acts 22, the second version, is Paul speaking to the crowd that's gathered as he's being arrested. And then in the third version, Paul speaking to the governor of Judea, Festus, and Bernice and Agrippa from the royal family. What are the facts of the conversion? That Paul was a Jew and that he was trained to be a rabbi. He was trained at the feet of Gamaliel, who's a famous rabbi of the first century, quoted in the Talmud. Gamaliel is the one who in Acts of the Apostles said, we shouldn't persecute the Christians because if they're from God, there's nothing we can do to stop them. If they're not from God, they'll die on their own. Paul persecuted the way. That was the first phrase that was used to describe Christians before the word Christian was used, followers of the way. And he had letters to arrest Christians in Damascus and bring them back to Jerusalem for punishment. Now that little detail is very problematic because Damascus was in a different province, and it wouldn't have been legal for the high priest to issue those letters. Now, was this Luke, the author of Acts of the Apostles, saying that the high priest did something illegal? Therefore the Jews are the ones who don't follow the law of Israel, where Christians do? Or is this due to the fact that, in fact, the high priest did issue illegal letters? We don't know. Paul saw a great light. Could this be lightning? Could it be some natural phenomena? It's possible because God often works through natural means. And in fact, the word for thunder in Hebrew, kol Adonai, means the voice of God. Remember Psalm 29, the voice of God over the waters, the voice of the God thunders. So it's possible it's lightning, or it's possible it's a supernatural phenomenon. He hears a voice that says, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? Two things here. He's called Saul. Saul is the Aramaic Hebrew name of the man. Paul is Greco-Latin name. It's not that Paul changed his name during his life. He's equally Saul and Paul all throughout his life. And why are you persecuting me? Paul is persecuting Christians, not Jesus. But when Christians suffer, Jesus suffers with them. His response, who are you, sir? Now that sir in Greek is Kyria. Remember, that's also translatable as Lord. So even without realizing it, Paul is saying the truth. Jesus responds, I'm Jesus of Nazareth. And he sends him into Damascus to Ananias, who will heal him from his blindness. Now the blindness, they describe it as a peeling away of some sort of scale on the eye. Maybe a form of cataract. And in fact, if this is lightning, then one of the effects of electrocution is the development of cataracts. Some people say this is Paul having a nervous breakdown, but that doesn't seem to be a very good explanation, because when somebody has a nervous breakdown, they become isolated, they become depressed. They don't go out preaching the good news, as Paul does in the version found in Acts 9. He goes out into the synagogues and proclaims that Jesus is the Son of God. And everybody's astounded because they know that he first had persecuted the church, and now he's proclaiming that the church really is proclaiming the true message. It's interesting that Ananias, when he's sent to help Paul, is told to go to the Straight Street. Straight Street is one of the oldest streets in the world that has a name. It's still to be found in Damascus. The Gospel is from Mark 16, 15 to 18. These are verses that were probably added to the Gospel of Mark. The original ending of the Gospel of Mark was chapter 16, verse 9. But then we have the rest of the chapter up to verse 20. It seems to be an amalgamation of the accounts found in the other Gospels. It's probable that the scribe who was copying this Gospel found the original ending unsatisfactory, because it ends with the women running away from the tomb and not saying anything about the resurrection because they're afraid. And so these verses were added, and they speak about baptism, they speak about driving out demons, speaking in new languages. Remember, Paul himself in 1 Corinthians speaks about how he's able to use glossolalia, speaking in tongues, picking up serpents with their hands. Remember what happened to Paul when he shipwrecked on the island of Malta? He picks up some firewood and he's bitten by a poisonous serpent and he's not harmed. So These are seen as a fulfillment of Paul's ministry as one of the apostles. Now, Paul is not one of the 12, but he's nevertheless an apostle, because the definition of apostle is a witness to the resurrected Jesus. And that's what Paul is when he encountered the resurrected Jesus on the road to Damascus. And may God bless us.